And as you speak, your voice causes chains to fall off of people's hearts. But it's not the words that you speak. It's like the frequency. It's the energy. She goes, I feel like when you enter a room, there's an excitement. And when I thought about the excitement, and I've been reading about the map of consciousness and different levels of consciousness and vibration, I do recognize that when I go into a room, there's no way the people in that room can stay at the same lower level of consciousness of guilt and shame. It's impossible. My presence and my voice itself, people say, Cliff, every time I get off of a coaching conversation with you, one woman, she says, I'm absolutely buzzing with excitement.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Before we continue this beautiful chat today, wonderful souls, I need to jump in here to share something really exciting. If you've been following these episodes or you've been following me on social media, you know that I am in the process of releasing my first book, Your Cosmic Love Antenna, Define, Embody, and Emit Your Unique Frequency of Love. And at the time of this episode release, pre-orders are now open. If you have been pulled to this show, if you're looking to understand the what, the how, and the why of love, if you're looking to apply some of the tools connected to your chakras, inner child, releasing religious trauma, ancestral healing, emotional release, and so much more, then this beautiful expression from my heart to yours is for you. If you are looking to channel more of your unique gifts and the divine frequency that you are, these pages will open all of this up. And if you're interested, all you need to do is go to cosmicloveantenna.com. That's cosmicloveantenna.com. And you can pre-order this book right now. If you pre-order, click on that link, put in your email, you're going to get access to some special gifts that I'm only offering to those who get in before I release it fully. These gifts are going to be some more channeled meditations, activations, and some other surprises from my heart to yours. So head over to cosmicloveantenna.com, pre-order this beautiful expression, and I can't wait to hear how it shifts your life. If you're listening to this after pre-order sales, that same link can be also used to go to the direct purchase link. Sending love, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of this episode today. Good morning, evening, afternoon, beautiful mystical beings. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the powerful conversation that we're going to have today. I'm so excited to introduce my guest here in a moment. But as always, for returning listeners and new listeners to the show, welcome to this mystical dance that we're going to have today. If you get a lot of value out of this conversation, as always, how you can help and support this chat getting out there into the mystical lands is by sharing this with a friend and a lover that you feel deeply to. If you have some things bubble up, some comments, some extra questions, or some feedback, you can always go over to Apple and Spotify and leave it over there. But this is how you support this conversation and help myself and the guest reach your hearts a lot more deeply. With that said, today we are going to get into what it means to coach heart to heart and connect heart to heart. And the beautiful being, the beautiful man that I have on the show to have this discussion is the mystical Cliff Ravenscraft. Cliff is the podcast answer man, now the mindset answer man. He is a master business coach and a powerful speaker. Today, we're going to have a conversation about what it means to coach heart to heart, what it means to apply mindset to this, how this impacts our business, what is our unique frequency of love, where our intuition comes in, and so much more. Cliff, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Harrison, I am honored to be here. And I know that you're approaching 100 episodes. Congratulations on that. And I think I remember tuning into your show. I think you were probably around episode number 30. And I was on a road trip and listened to like the first 20 episodes in a row after discovering you on Clubhouse. And to think that I'm now a guest on your show, I'm honored. You've got some great content, and I love your heart for people. I love your energy, and it means a lot to me to know that you invited me to be a guest.
Well, it's no surprise here, Cliff. We're going to start with a sort of heartfelt opening. I receive all of your love, but I want to share my own story on top of what you're expressing here. I don't know if you remember this, but that's actually my first interaction with you, Cliff. Hearing your voice was actually you giving me affirmations of love on Clubhouse towards my podcast. And I was like, this person, he's obviously getting value from what I'm saying. But then as I looked into, you're doing this whole world yourself, right? You're a profound speaker, you're a profound podcast host. And despite all of that, despite all of those things that you achieved, you moved through those labels and those personas that we put on, and you shared from your heart to me. And I remember I received that so deeply, having never met you, never heard you before, but you went straight to the heart, and I'd never forgotten that. And it's why I wanted to have this chat with you today. So I receive your love, but as always, I'm going to reflect it back to you, because we attract what we are in many ways.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. And the reason why I went so far out of my way is I was, as you were saying, going through a process of removing labels at the time. And there were still, I had made much progress on my spiritual journey up to the point where I discovered your podcast. But there were a couple of episodes that are in those first 20 or so episodes where the topics were like still things that I was just hanging on to. And the guests that you had, the conversations, it's just like, yeah, there was some more unraveling to do. And it was great. It was an awakening experience. And I wanted to make sure to tell you the next time I saw you on Clubhouse. So that it was a meaningful experience for me.
Well, I'm excited to get into that a bit more today, my friend, because since that conversation that we had, just for people listening, I've had the pleasure of delving more into you, and I sent you a message on LinkedIn because I'd started listening to all of your beautiful shows, and I say shows plural because you are so lovingly prolific in what you're expressing out there into the world. And it was through what you were expressing, this idea of the transition that you just alluded to, of being the podcast answer man now into the mindset answer man, that really intrigued me. And so I'd love to maybe start with this, Cliff, if you can elaborate for people listening, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is a part of your spiritual awakening, is this transition that you had. Can you maybe speak to, what happened here? What made you shift into, being all about podcasts and putting people with the technicalities to now, doing the work that you do with the mind and the subconscious?
Well, honestly, it all started when I was a little kid. Attending church services like Baptist churches, Methodist churches, Nazarene churches, Pentecostal churches, Assembly of God churches, all on the weekends and during vacation Bible study schools and stuff like this, and attending Catholic school from first grade through seventh grade. So attending Mass with my classmates every Friday, even though I'm not Catholic, and sitting in religious education classes. So from the earliest time I was a kid, I was introduced to this concept of God from a very Christian perspective, both Catholic and Protestant. And quite frankly, where the two were very much at odds with one another, at least the branches that I were a part of. And I'll never forget, I think I was about 8 years old. I went to this Baptist church with my aunt, and it was the first time I'd ever heard that I was going to burn in hell for eternity if I wasn't one of God's elect few that have been saved. And I was kind of freaked out about that. And I asked her, I said, hey, how do I get this taken care of? And she said, well, you just go up next week.
How old were you again?
I think I was about 8 years old.
Yeah. I just interrupt here, Cliff, because I know this. I want to keep hearing the story, but I know this is such a big. I was listening to one of your episodes yesterday. I know you speak about this a lot. This idea of that 0 to 7, 0 to age frame being so important for a child's development, and for that child that you were to be impacted like this in the way that you were, it's significant, right?
It is, because from the age 0 to 7, we have no critical thinking capacity whatsoever.
Yep.
We cannot criticize any data that comes in. As children, we soak up everything. Our brain is looking to create neuroassociations, synapses to fire to make sense or meaning out of what we are hearing or experiencing in this world. So at this very young age, I am getting this messaging of God as a wrathful, angry God that needs to be appeased, and the only way he could do so is to kill his own son on my behalf. And I would have never expressed it in that way until after deconstructing so much of the way that I viewed life. But from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to do two things with my life, that there was a purpose for my life. At least this was my feeling from an early. I want to, number one, I want to love God with all my heart, soul, strength, spirit, everything. And I want to avoid burning in hell for eternity. So those were two big priorities of mine.
It's funny that we have to acknowledge that. It's interesting. And I just say this because I've done, you probably know this, Cliff, and the people listening know this. I've done so many conversations and episodes now on this dynamic between the inner God and the outer God, whether it be it's funny that you say Baptist, because I keep attracting Baptist people that have been in this experience. And it's interesting that we need to say that, even need to have that conversation. But keep going with your story.
Yep. So I'll go through and just give you a couple little pinpoints along my journey, that because my spiritual awakening has been going on since I was born into this earth, as I think everyone's is. So fast forward to by the way, the next week I went to church with my aunt, went up in front. I said, I want to be saved. He told me to say this thing, and I'm like, good. I got my get out of jail free card. Life is good. Until I'm about 18 years old. So at 18 years old, I'm dating this girl, and she's Christian, and I'm going to this Bible study group with her. We're in a Nazarene church at this point, and I'm thinking like, this is awesome. I'm really enjoying my time with her, and she invites me to come have dinner with her family. And I go, and I'm having dinner with her family, and I am interrogated. So, Cliff, tell me about you. How did you become a Christian? And of course, I give all of my credentials. I've been in Catholic school since I was a kid. I've attended all this and blah, blah, blah. By the way, I've attended church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, blah, 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 blah. I get home thinking I have totally won them over. I mean, I had all of the merit badges you could possibly have. And this girl calls me out and she says, hey, I have to break up with you. And I said, why? She goes, well, because my mom and dad said that I'm not allowed, I do not have permission to date a man who is not a Christian. And I really liked this girl, but you know what? At that moment, I could care less about the loss of that relationship. I instantly feared for my eternal soul. I had not had that fear since I was 8 years old. And all of a sudden, I'm experiencing it again. And I'm like, wow, how is this? What do I do? And so we were also attending this Bible study class, but we were also attending this other church on Sundays, and it was Nazarene as well. And there was this Sunday school leader, class leader, and he was very approachable. I reached out to him. I said, listen, I hope you don't mind I'm calling you late at night, but I just fear that if I die tonight, I'm going to burn in hell for eternity. Let me tell you what's going on. This person says I'm not a Christian. How do I solve this? I desperately want to love God and not burn in hell, but somebody doesn't think that I'm living up to what it means to be a Christian. And I'm really concerned about that. And I need to have some certainty here. And of course, being a Christian was everything to my identity, because it's all I'd known since I was a kid about anything related to God. So I go through and he walks me through these 4 spiritual laws or the Roman road, one of these 4 little things. He says, hey, do this, do this. It's like, yeah, I've done that. He goes, well, just say it now and you're done. You've got it. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, now here's what you want to do. You want to read your Bible every day and you want to start attending church every day and blah, 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 blah. And what happened, Harrison, is I became so overly zealous at this point. At that point, I believe it or not, for a while, I wasn't interested in girls at all. All I was interested was in God. And I genuinely felt this passion and connection and just aliveness inside that I'd not experienced before. But I attributed it to the prayers that I prayed. I attributed it to the Bible stuff that I was reading, and I attributed it to my attendance in this gathering. And I attributed it, all of this aliveness, to my moral code of conduct, the doing the things I should do and the not doing the things I shouldn't do. And I became a very self-righteous, very arrogant, out there Christian trying to evangelize everyone.
Cliff, before you keep going, I want to point out something, because I know where your story's heading here, and I want to describe something for people listening as you're listening to Cliff's words. This is not just a Baptist, Catholic, Christian conversation, right? This searching for God, external versus internal. Like you just made the point of you were looking for the girls, right? And I would say that even that is, in many cases, I know it was for me, that was still searching for God, right? Because why are we looking? Why are we looking for the girls? Why are we wanting to find that partner? It's to fill that God-shaped hole in most of us have, and then we externalize. But I want to plant a seed here as you continue your story of something called your Imago Dei archetype, right? And you speak a lot about how those 0 to 7 years, my friend, of the inner child impact us. That's an archetype. But there's one that precedes that, and that is the Imago Dei, and that's our relationship to God. That's whether God is external or whether God is internal. So keep going with your story, but I want people to sort of feel this archetype inside of them as they hear your story and the transitions that you're taking. Have you heard of that before, Cliff?
I've not heard about the archetypes of the Imago Dei, but I've heard the phrase Imago Dei before, but just not the explanation.
Keep going with your story. Righteousness.
Yes. So I was in the Nazarene church. They have this song. It's all about holiness, perfect sanctification, and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into their theology, but I really was believing that, this is my thing that I'm working towards attaining, this entire sanctification, until I met a girl. And then all of a sudden we began doing things that we ought not do, at least as far as what's being adopted as their teachings. Yeah. And as a result of that, here I am now, a leader of young adults in Sunday school classes and Bible studies. And here I am doing things that are opposed to everything that we teach morally. And I just left. No, I did not say I was leaving. One day I was given a brand new responsibility. Cliff, we want you to teach this young adult Sunday school class. And here it is. It was my first day. I walked, it was in a school, and this classroom was full of young adults, like about 30, 35 students, or 30 to 35 young adults. And I peeked around the corner. I saw them in there. I turned around, walked to my car, got in my car, and I never stepped foot in a church for another year and a half to 2 years, because I felt so much guilt and shame, and that I had failed, and I never spoke to anyone, and not even that girl. I completely, like everything, just walked out on everybody. And that was the same time I was going to college after graduating high school. And I spent my entire first semester, for one whole semester of college, there were 2 days I was sober. I joined a fraternity, got drunk. I was drunk every day. I was sober 2 days, still had straight A's, by the way. But it's just like I was just living this crazy party life. Everything that had been repressed, I'm like all in, let's do this. I finally decided to stop drinking and just took up smoking pot instead. But it's just like all of this just different way of living life, partying, hanging out with the frat buddies. And then
Cliff, just to interrupt, it's interesting because what comes up on my heart, and this is really the journey that we're taking here, that Cliff's elaborating and sharing from his experience. It is really the journey from the head to the heart. But the question I was going to ask you as you're just expressing that, the guilt and the shame, it manifests. It doesn't just go away, right? That guilt and shame that you experienced around that situation, right? It doesn't just, unless we acknowledge it and release it, it's going to show up in other ways, right? So it sounds like it showed up in the relationship with alcohol and the partying. Did you feel that? Did you eventually acknowledge that?
I eventually acknowledged. Not at the time, I didn't. Yeah. I got out of the alcohol because my biological dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict from the time I was born until he died in 2015. And I knew I didn't want to go the alcohol route that he did. And so that's what mostly got me out of there. But there was a lot of guilt and shame that came up, especially, alcohol is all fun and games until you get into a deep part of it, and it leads into a lot of, and so, there's a lot of shame and guilt but it kept I kept pushing it down. And you're right, it continued to pop up again like whack-a-mole in my life until it finally was eliminated. I'll get to that part of the story. But here's what happened though, is I met a girl who is now my wife. We've been married for more than 26 years now. And when we were dating, I said she was starting to talk about getting married, and I'm like, I don't think I'm the marrying type. I don't know that I have what it takes. I'm not a good man. All this stuff, all this repressed stuff about how I feel about myself. I'm not right with God. She was attending an Assembly of God church at the time, very charismatic, out there kind of spirit-filled church, if you will. And we went. She invited me to come to her church, and it was the first time I'd walk in several years. To say that there was an overwhelming presence there is an understatement. I mean, like, I felt it. It's like, whoa, there is something here that is, wow. And so there was this guy playing this bass guitar, and Harrison, here's what he did. He saw me at the back of the church after the service was over. He says, "My name is Bill Grimm, and you have no idea who I am, but I want to tell you, God gave me a message to share with you." And I'm like, oh gosh, not one of these nut jobs. That's the first thought that came to my mind. And he says, "Listen, I saw you come in with Stephanie. You must be her boyfriend that she's been talking about. Anyway, that's not what he says, I don't know anything about you, but God told me to give you this message. And he first wants me to tell you that, yes, you're going to think I'm crazy, but that has nothing to do with anything. I just want you to know, God wants you to know that one day you will be involved in ministry full time, and you will minister to tens of thousands of people." So that's
interesting, Cliff, especially because I know that I have some more questions I want to jump to here in a sec, Cliff, but maybe you've reflected on this, but that's what you do now, right? I know that this is a part of your journey too, right? But what you do now, whether it's your speaking that you do, or the podcast that you do, or the business coaching that you do, it is that speaking to the masses, right? To that God, and filling that God-shaped hole with the people inside of you. But let me ask a question here, Cliff, because I want to jump to some other questions. How does this factor into? And I feel like the answer is already coming through me, but I'm interested to hear you saying it. How does this factor into your big shift into sort of where you're at now? Because I know a lot of people listening might be new to your voice. So if you sort of see this spiritual awakening that you've been through, how does it lead to Cliff that I'm speaking to in this moment?
So I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So I decide, my wife and I, or Stephanie and I, decide to get married. I decide that I'm going to start leading small group Bible study groups, like the ones I used to attend with that girl in the Nazarene church. That was the only time I ever felt really close in my relationship with God. And I want to have that if I'm going to be married to you. And then we get married. A few months after we get married, I feel like I want to devote the rest of my life to being of service to others through full-time ministry. And I don't know what that looks like. And I went to my pastor at the time. He goes, well, that obviously means you should be a pastor. And so I start studying for the ministry and I become an ordained pastor. And so I go through all of this stuff. I go for about 10 years as an associate pastor in a church. I'm preaching. I perform weddings. I do all of that stuff. But all of that on the side voluntarily, because throughout a 10-year period or 12-year period of time, I began working in a family-run insurance agency owned by my mom and dad that was started by my grandfather in 1937. And I also developed an incredibly profitable, successful career as an insurance agent, selling auto, home, life, and health insurance. So all of this happened, and then the wheels fell off the wagon on this ministry thing. So I started podcasting as a hobby in 2005, 17 years ago.
It's funny how it starts like that.
Yep. And so my wife and I are podcasting about this television show Lost, and there's this television episode called All Good Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. I had some daddy issues. Stephanie had some daddy issues, and we share a little bit about our stories. There's this episode called the 23rd Psalm where they misquoted the 23rd Psalm, and I'm sharing about, what the actual 23rd Psalm actually says and how it changes the meaning and what it might mean to the show. And people are just like, oh my gosh,
loving it.
Our emails are being flooded, hundreds of emails. By the way, by our third episode of this podcast, we have 27,000 subscribers, tens of thousands. So
because it aligned, it was a lot. So this is, I keep hearing, I know where this is going, my friend, but I have a hunch around what that is, but I'll get back to that. Keep going.
So what happened was, all of a sudden I started to think there's no way I'm ever going to be an insurance agent for the rest of my life because I want to be a pastor or I want to be in full-time ministry. But over time, I realized I have a greater opportunity to be of service to others as an insurance agent beyond what I've been able to experience in 10 years as a pastor role and what I've seen other pastors do. So as an insurance agent, I was oftentimes the first time somebody would call somebody if there was a daughter who was just involved in a car accident, if a house just caught on fire, if there's a tornado. I often spoke to people in that moment of crisis. And I'm like, this is much more aligned, if you will, with what I feel called to do in this world than actually being a pastor. So I had already decided I'm not going to become a full-time pastor. My full-time ministry is being of service here in this insurance office, because here I'm reaching a couple thousand people in our community, where here I'm reaching about 80 people to 100 people on the weekend. So then now I'm reaching tens of thousands of people. And these people are asking me questions every week via email that are their deepest, darkest secrets, fears, and anxieties and worries.
And this is where the shift happens.
I'm like, I wonder what life would be like if I could do this for a living instead of insurance. Even though, frankly, Harrison, if I would have stayed in insurance, my dad has already retired now. I'd own the agency and I'd be making multiple millions of dollars a year in personal income in every year.
And that's important to point out, Cliff, because that goal, that ambition, that business objective is ego-based, right? That is, and no judgment on people that do that, but there's a very, very big distinction, because this is really where this chat is going, and what I want to focus in on here is heart, connecting into the heart. But keep going, wrap up this with your beautiful mindset transition.
So what happened was I began dreaming, I wonder if I could do this for a living. And when I say this for a living, it's what I'm doing today as the Mindset Answer Man. So this has always been the thread, even going back to when I was 18 years old. It's just, my heart is being of service and encouraging others. And in fact, even though I no longer hold on to the term Christian, I still hold on to this mantra. My purpose is to encourage others through Christ. But I now think of it encouraging others through Christ consciousness rather than just the person of Jesus.
I'm so happy you said that, my friend. That's actually something I haven't talked about here on the show, actually. idea of Christ consciousness, that this is not, and for the Christians listening and Catholics listening, I send you so much love, but that Christ consciousness is accessible through us, right? It's accessible to unlock through us, right? It's an easy way to explain this, right? It wasn't Jesus Christ. Christ wasn't his last name. Christ was the consciousness that Jesus was awakening and sharing. And that awakening, as Cliff is highlighting in his beautiful story, is something that we can unlock and then share with other people. Does that resonate with you, Cliff?
Absolutely. And in fact, Jesus, speaking as the Christ, I pray, Father, that they would be one in Christ consciousness as you and I are.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Look, I have so much to add, but finish off the story, my friend. Yep. So then you made the shift into mindset.
I made the shift not into mindset because at the time I needed a lot of mindset help. I had a lot of limiting mindset. So what I did believe, I had already demonstrated that I had a lot of people who were willing to pay me money to teach them how to podcast. And at least that gave me the freedom to do the work that I want, when I want, who I want to work with. Whereas in the insurance, I had to stay there 40 hours a week guaranteed. And that's 40 hours a week every week that I was not allowed to do anything related to my passion. All right.
Which is hard, which is if you're only focused on the ego aspects, you might not see it. You could ignore it, suppress it, and numb it. But if you're an insensitive, intuitive person, which if you're listening to Cliff's story, he very much is, you can't ignore that.
Yeah. So I had to get out of it, and I did. And so in January 2008, I became what the world known as podcast answer man. I struggled like crazy my first year, only made $11,000 net income, working about 70, 80 hours a week. But at the end of the year, I was profitable. I paid all of the overhead. I didn't go into debt, all of this other stuff. It was a great year, only made $11,000, which is a lot less than what I was used to. But that began, and I celebrated in the hospital in January 2009 for 2 weeks in the hospital where I almost died as a result of massive gallstones, of all the stress and anxiety.
The body's speaking to you. The body's speaking.
It is like, wow, something's got to change. That began my personal development, that self-help journey, which began to move me down the path of introducing me to things like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and Psychocybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz and Tony Robbins materials and all this other stuff that, quite frankly, for a long time, I avoided these things because self-help is the slippery slope that leads you away from from God. Exactly. So I'm still very much, I spent about 10 or 12, actually a total of 12 years as the podcast answer man. And during that time,
sorry to interrupt you, my friend, but just because you're very modest about this, not just 12 years, but very successful years, right? Building up to this man that you were, right? And for people that are just listening, you can't see this, but even I can see on your podcast video, you have a little podcast answer man symbol, right? And you were very successful, my friend. It was this was another opportunity in which you could have very easily stuck with the ego and the personas and say, I'm just going to stay with this. I'm going to continue with this fame, this connection to people that I'm building, but you didn't.
Yeah. When Harrison is talking about some of the success that I experienced after studying personal growth and development and beginning to implement all of the things that I was learning, I personally am responsible for helping more than 40,000 people launch a podcast. And most everyone who has a podcast today either learned from me, learned from somebody who learned from me, or learned from somebody who learned from somebody who learned from me. So that's the place where I had risen to in the podcasting industry. And I did, over the course of those 12 years, generate somewhere around $7 million in personal income. So, and I was at the place where $500,000 a year, every year, was pretty much guaranteed. And in January 2015, I began to have that uneasiness.
It's like came again. It came again. Did it?
It was the exact same thing. I wonder what life would be like if I could do this instead of this. It was just, instead of insurance, now it's instead of teaching people how to podcast.
Where did you feel it, my friend? Just because I speak a lot about, as you probably know, speak a lot about the chakra system and how the body speaks as it already has in your journey.
It was in my gut. It was right in. It was in the solar plexus.
Yeah.
It's just my creative voice was getting squashed. I was so in demand as a podcast consultant answering people's technical issues that I did not allow myself the time to let my own creative voice get out and entertain, educate, encourage, and inspire people. And I'm like, I'm making so much money, but every day a little piece of me is dying. And I want to come back to life again. And so I decided I'm going to find a way to shift from podcast answer man to mindset answer man. And I began to go in depth into study of people who are doing the kind of work that I do today. I've studied probably about 4,000 hours worth of Tony Robbins materials. I quoted all by heart. But I began also to study all of these other personal development materials. And I'm like, I can do this. And I implemented plans. I started paid workshops, made $35,000 to $45,000 in a weekend. I did annual conferences. I start doing paid mastermind groups, all of this stuff, allowing me to do exactly the work that I want to do. And I didn't need the $500,000 a year. So I got to the place where right at the height of the pandemic, I built my business in a way where I never have to work more than 12 hours a week and I can easily make $30,000 a month. And I'm like, that's more than enough for me. But during this process, because I had so much free time, I read a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And that opened the floodgates like nothing else, Harrison.
That's so, I want to hear about this, my friend, but I just want to reflect on your beautiful journey, right? I'm so happy. I didn't expect you to tell me your whole story, but I'm very happy that you did, because now everyone is caught up with your beautiful experience. And maybe you can share in relation to the autobiography of a yogi here. But the question that I want to ask you here, and this is really, as I listen to your story and as I've been listening to your podcast chats, and this is why I want to have you on the show, what you highlighted in your beautiful adventure is a continual connection back to the heart, right? Every time the ego mind came up, and we're not here to vilify the ego mind, it has a very important role within our development. But what we are here to do is to constantly check in and ask, is this the path my heart wants to walk? Is this the path that my heart expresses itself? So I'm interested, my friend. One, I want to hear about how the autobiography of the yogi factored into this. But I think the bigger question I want to hear you answer here is, do you think this will happen again? Do you think a shift will occur with the heart, much like it already has in many different ways?
At least one more time. At least one more time. And I know this because it's already started. Like I already have a vision. If you were to say, Cliff, is there another question you're asking yourself? What would life be like if I could do this instead of what I'm doing now? Yeah, that question's already brewing, and the vision of it's already there. There's a part of me that sees myself owning a couple hundred acres of land in a mountainous area with plenty of woods, and building a retreat center for people to get away from the hustle and bustle of their normal lives, learn how to go within, experience what deep meditation is, learn what transcendental meditation is, teach them how to get in touch with their heart and to experience unity and oneness with God, and then to convince them that they don't have to be here to do it, that you can actually go and experience this at home.
Oh, I love it.
I ask myself, what would be like if I were doing that for a living instead of what I'm doing now?
And that's where the autobiography of the yogi comes in, my friend. I feel that through your purpose. So this is really the crux of this chat, is this frequency of the heart that you are, my friend. And maybe you can speak to this. I'm sure that you've noticed throughout those different pivots throughout your life, and this is what I want people to really reflect on in their own journey, that there's probably been a lot of people that have left your life, but there's also been people that have stayed within that journey.
Yes.
And what I want to ask you here is, why do you think they stayed? And what I'm getting at to frame this is the Cliff that I see in the human form is the layer of you. It's a beautiful layer, but it's a layer. But there is something in that heart that is a deeper essence of you. And that essence continues throughout your life. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on this. Does this resonate, my friend, in your transitions?
Yeah, it does. There are a lot of people who are no longer a part of my life through the various different transitions. And there are a handful of people who are very much. And every one of those people, while they may not be able to articulate it, not all of them, my wife obviously does and is. She's one person who's stuck through everything with me, and she definitely she understands and fully buys into the essence of who I am beyond this personality, this persona that I wear called Cliff Ravenscraft, currently known as the Mindset Answer Man today. But she definitely understands the fullness of the meaning of I am a divine spiritual being here having a human experience. Now, I have my mastermind group that I'm a part of, that I've been a part of since 2010. This is a group of myself and 5 other men. We've been meeting every week for over a decade. And these 5 men, all of them would probably wear the label of Christian very easily. And one of the 5 men he completely understands this new way out there version of who I am today, and stuff like that. The other 4 don't quite understand it, but they know that not only that they accept it, they realize that while some people will perceive that Cliff has changed, they don't.
Yes, that's the point. Good. So that's a beautiful example of your brainstorming, your networking mastermind group. When we spend time with people long enough, whether we are consciously aware of it or not, we pick up on the frequency that is them. The frequency of that is them, that is behind the personas, as you said. And it's interesting because this is where I want to take this chat next here, Cliff, and shift into more, practical business coaching aspects. You don't just talk about this stuff. You don't just act this stuff in your own life. As you've alluded to, you support other people with this. And currently, as the Mindset Answer Man, you do this through the coaching lens. So I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to here, and we'll go back and forth on this. What is the role of being in this intuitive heart space when you are coaching or mentoring someone? What does it look like?
So when I am coaching or mentoring someone, first and foremost, I recognize that I have a connection to what I had previously labeled as God, which is a connection to my higher self, to the Christ consciousness, the universal cosmic consciousness. And I realize that when I'm actually engaging another human being, that I recognize that my ego and personality is interacting with their ego and personality. And currently, that's the only layer for which they're able to perceive our conversation. But what I experience what I, Cliff Ravenscraft, experience as a coach is I'm engaging with my client and they telling me, well, I say, hey, what's going on? What is it that you're looking to create in this world? What are you most excited about pursuing next? What is it that is there anything that I can do to be of support or encouragement to you? So they tell me what it is their heart desires. And then they tell me all of the reasons why they're not able to get there. And of course, I don't buy into that story because I believe well, first of all, it's all an illusion, yeah. but your illusion that you can't reach your illusion is an illusion. So I know that
Yeah, that's big. That's big. I want to just break that down for a moment because it's so, when I hear that, the part of my ego, there's a part of me that's like, oh, that's such a spiritual woo-woo shit, right? Bullshit. But it's real.
It is
It's a
real.
reality. But I want to keep hearing you express this because as a mentor, as a coach, that's holding space for these illusions to come up. It's not about condemning them and judging
No.
them. It's about actually loving them through them.
Well, one of the things that I learned when I made the transition, when I knew I wanted to be a mindset answer man coach and not just this consultant guy, I learned a ton of stuff from Tony Robbins. And one thing I learned, if you want to create change in another person, you can never do so if you judge them.
Yeah.
You will never create change in a person that you are judging.
Yeah.
Because they even if you're holding that judgment inside and it never their inner being knows it, even though they're not aware of it, they will sense it, even though they don't understand what it is that they're sensing. They will feel your judgment.
And I would take this a step further, my friend. You know, as you were explaining that, I often get images in my third eye. And I got the image of the finger pointing outwards, right? And whenever we judge, I would actually assert that all judgment is self-judgment, right? So when one finger is pointing at someone to judge, there's three fingers pointing back. So even that projection of the judgment that we perceive is on them, it also doesn't feel good because it's also our own judgment that we're not seeing.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I do is, coaching from the heart around mindset is I never want to judge anyone that I am coaching, even the thing that they're going after. Even if I don't think that it's something worthy going after, that's not for me to judge. It's a part of their journey. It's a part of what they're currently going after. And my goal is to help them do what it is they're seeking out to do. And ultimately sometimes the coming to the realization that once you achieve that, it didn't give you what you truly want. That's a part of the journey as well. Sometimes I can ask a question and say, is this what you truly want? And get to it. But a lot of the people I work with, Harrison, they're not into this. They're not very self-aware.
No.
So, and again, that's not a judgment. It's just an observation. And so I take each person, and what I want to do is I want to understand and appreciate where they are. So what is it that you want to do? And now tell me, what have you already done? And what obstacles have you run into? And they begin to tell me stories. They have a narrative. And that narrative is based upon their beliefs that they picked up, most of which they picked up during the first 7 or 8 years in their life.
And this is, Cliff, I know where you're going here. Just to put a full circle on something we talked about before, this is where not only the inner child comes up, as you were just alluding to, but also where that relationship to God comes up, right? That Imago Dei. Do you notice that in that experience, that example?
I do. I notice it where the inner child comes in. I still don't. I don't know that I'm completely following just authentically the Imago Dei. If you want to explain it to me now, I can take it in.
It's basically, to put it very simply, it's the relationship to our power, right? Is our power something we see outside of ourselves? I need to go to the doctor. I need to go to the coach. I need to go to the news. I need to go to the government. I need to go to the religious group to obtain my power. Or if I don't know where my power is, can I go in? Can I go into that power that I know is inside of me?
And that's what Imago Dei means, finding the power within.
Yeah. And for most people, it's the first option that they take is looking outside for the power.
Yes.
Because based off, and again, I'm not here to only pinpoint religious groups, but it's because most of us have had some kind of indoctrination through religious upbringings that we are taught that power is firstly outside of us.
Well, even Harrison, it's not just the religious. There's a book called Super Coach.
Yeah.
So in Super Coach, when I read this book by Michael Neal, he said that we were born with an innate well-being.
Yeah.
That we are at peace and we have everything within ourselves. But what happens is all of a sudden we get swaddled and we get comforted and stuff like this, and all of a sudden we have a rumbling in our belly, and we get hungry, and then somebody from the outside feeds us. And then all of a sudden, we experience this, and somebody coddles us, and we feel this. And what happens is that child has no way of critically thinking. But what happened is that child, by being coddled, without knowing it, they were the source of their well-being, but they created a neuroassociation that person called mommy or that person named daddy is responsible for my well-being. And so it starts even as an infant. And then all of a sudden there's this one day, and this book is written so brilliantly. One day you knock over the HD TV and dad starts swearing and screaming and he's upset and blah, blah, blah. And now you've been rocked out of your world and he hates me and blah, blah, blah. And now you begin to say, oh, I need to start adapting who I am in the presence of these people to be safe in my sense of well-being. And so it becomes now from that point forward, we begin to condition our belief throughout all of our experience that as long as I can vote for the right politician, say the right things to these people, all of this stuff, I have to adhere to the expectations of my community and everyone to fit in and have well-being.
Yeah. We could have a whole conversation on this, my friend, on this 0 to 7 age frame. And you're so right. Thank you for pinpointing, there are, whether it's religion, whether it's the family dynamic, as you just highlighted, whether it's the government programming, whether it's, the education system, that's a whole other category of, most education systems have this dynamic as well. So, but let's go back a little bit here, Cliff, to the container, the coaching container. And the question I want to ask you, which really hit my heart, and I heard you explain on one of your conversations on your podcast around the intuitive dynamic movement of the coaching process. And what I mean by this is everything you just talked about with connecting into the person, moving through their illusions, helping them from the heart, moving through their inner child. It's very hard to put a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 structure on how this develops, where what is optimal in my experience, and this is what you spoke about, that the supporting is more of an intuitive sort of dynamic process. So let me explain it more succinctly. If Cliff was coming to me for this kind of support, it would actually be better for me each session that we had for it to be just intuitive, for me to tune in the moment to the highest need that comes up versus fitting you into a box that I need to make you fit. Does that resonate, my friend?
Yes. There are two different dynamics here. First, you spoke of the frameworks and the step-by-steps and the stuff like that. And I find that everybody's on a different journey. And so formulas, they can be useful. Frameworks can be incredibly useful in certain things. Like, for example, if you want to achieve a goal, I have a 10-step formula that's pretty much guaranteed to get you anything you want. But the thing is you may not want what you say you want. And that's before we get into a framework, a step-by-step guide of how to create something, let's make sure it's what you want, because be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. And that's where, so I'll give you a perfect example of what you're talking about. I just did a coaching package for Black Friday through Cyber Monday. I said $1,500, work with me for 3 months, 1 call per month. And I had all of them fill out their application. And Harrison, I know that this is going out in audio, but I'll just show you what happens when I get somebody, they fill out an application to tell me, what's going on in their life and what is it they want to create. So today, this morning at 10:30, I had a gentleman, and here's my notes from his application. And on here was if this guy truly wants to talk about what he put in his application, I know exactly what direction I think we should go. So I prepared for an hour to go in the direction that he would want to go, knowing full well there's only a 3% chance that we'll touch anything on this list. Because here's what I said at the beginning of the call. Number one, are you 100% distraction free? Number two, may I have permission to be your coach? And that means, may I ask you questions or say things that will challenge you at the deepest level? And then the third thing I said was, I've read every single word you've submitted in your application. I have notes and I have prepared all sorts of ways we could go and tackle everything you put on your application. But first, I just have to ask you this question. If we didn't touch any of that, what would you and I need to talk about today that would make this the most important and most valuable conversation you've ever had in your life? And I just wait to see what they say. And then I take it from there, and it's all intuitively guided.
Yeah. And I would say, so it's a beautiful example, my friend. I would say, if that person in that moment, to your question of, if I ignore all of this and we just hit on, I call it what's top of your heart, if they have a reaction to that, if they're triggered by that, I would say that's probably the most important thing, right? Because everything you just described in terms of all the things that they write and people express, and I don't want to, they do have value, right? I know you're saying that too. But as we went back to before with the ego illusions, there is a root problem that most of these stories are stemming from. So when we speak about connecting heart to heart, whether it's through coaching, mentoring, podcasting, in many ways, it's about getting to that root, right? It's getting to that root problem.
Yeah. Another thing, Harrison, that's coming up for me when it comes to intuitively coaching from the heart is helping people to get closer to the source of their identity.
Yeah. Yeah, their real identity.
Their real identity. So that ultimately, that's what I most want to help people do. I want to help people come to experience peace, love, joy, and an overwhelming sense of abundance, regardless of any external circumstance. And that only comes from Christ consciousness. So I know this, but my clients most of them aren't quite there, right? And so my hope is to help them get a little bit closer to their identity. And the thing is we're not even talking about the identity they have with their persona, but we're actually talking about like sub-identities. Like, for example, I had a guy that I talked to recently, and he said, oh gosh, where is this one here?
And most of these identities, just as you're finding it, they exist in that subconscious, right? This is why the subconscious is so powerful, right? Keep going.
So this guy he's working full time. He wants to branch out, create his own business, and he wants to do speaking, he wants to do coaching, and he wants to do training and workshops. All three of which he's done. He's been paid to do several times, but he's never done it on his own. And he says, but there's a part of me that just asks, am I good enough to charge and have people pay me? And then he says, I tend to be a bit of a poser. And I'm like, no, we're going to start right here. This is not your identity. You are not a poser. We've got to get clear from here. And what I try to do is I begin to use language that these individuals are accustomed to. Let me speak to you about the power of your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is unlimited. It has unlimited resources to support anything you program.
Confirmation bias.
Yep. And so without talking about law of attraction, I just talk about the fact that the words you speak, when you say, Cliff, I struggle with this, I always have, and this is my biggest issue, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. No, let's just start using transformative language. I'd love for you to say, up until this point, I've had a history of doing this. And I'm seeking and know that there are solutions so that I can accomplish what I want to create. Can you say that? Because here's what I want you to know. Your subconscious mind is kind of like a computer program. And whatever language you program, it says, I will do whatever I can, which it's unlimited in its power, to support you in staying true to what you believe your identity is. Your value is to be honest, and you just spoke to Cliff that you're a poser and not worthy of being paid to speak and do training and coaching. And if you speak that to Cliff and you're speaking it to yourself, that's what you believe to be true. I will do everything in my power to make you align with your truth.
Yeah. And I'm going to add a spiritual lens to this, because you're beautifully highlighting the mental realm here and what the mental realm creates to the subconscious. But I'll take it a step further and reference Autobiography of a Yogi, right? In that book, there's a lot of Vedic lenses, a lot of Vedic teachings. And the Vedic worldview teaches, my friend, and I'm sure you know this, that there is no objective outside reality. There is no me here and outside world there. The outside world is created of our internal state of consciousness. If our internal state of consciousness is the poser, or it's funny that you picked out that, what I picked out was the I'm not good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
If my internal state is I'm not good enough, then that is the world that I create. Every single opportunity that wants to come in is filtered through the lens of consciousness of I'm not good enough.
Yeah. And I yes, that is exactly how I view it from my lens as a coach from coming in. But I have to find a way to I have to translate it in a way, not in a way that they would understand, because I think I could even teach it in a way that they would understand it, but it would butt so much against their belief system that I know they're not ready to be confronted with that. And quite frankly, I get the sense that it's like, ooh, I don't want to take away this person's identity just yet. I don't think they're in a place where in their life right now where they can completely take it all away. Yeah, because it's a protective thing.
Yeah, and it's very important.
Yeah. So my goal isn't to immediately bring everyone to an awakening of their self-realization. That's not my goal. My goal is to aid them where they are on whatever spiritual path they happen to be on, at least in this season of my life. I think there might be a day in my future where just come into my presence and let's just hang here and
Cliff,
I'll do what Muji does.
Cliff, it's not in the future. It already happened, my friend.
I know.
I know this segues perfectly where I want to take this next, actually. You do this already, Cliff, by just, and this goes back all the way to what we were saying before about being the frequency of what we are, right? This is the solution to the I'm not good enough, in my opinion, is remembering that the frequency that you are is not only enough, but the frequency of what you are is the medicine. So this leads into a question I want to ask you, Cliff, is you, as I said at the start of the show, are prolific in your beautiful podcasting shows and content and the love that you give via them. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the role of the voice in expressing this love frequency that we've been speaking about, this heart. And I'll just give one example here and pass to you. I often speak about the throat chakra. There's a reason that the throat is on top of the heart. It's because the throat is one of the first places our love has the opportunity to meet the world.
Yeah. Well, I understand the power of the voice in a way that I've never understood before. And I do believe that the voice that God has given me has a tonal frequency in and of itself that unlocks something in the hearts of other people. It breaks chains off of their own spiritual being, their bondage that they're in. It doesn't matter the words that I speak, just the sound of my voice. I want you to hear something. I'm going to play something. This is from Michael. Do you know who Michael Hyatt is?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to play this. Listen to this.
Well, I've told you before, this is why I listen to your podcast. It's not because I need more technical information on podcasting. I just listen to you because I like the way that you think about life, how you approach the problems you're trying to solve, and just your voice. So you could be talking about anything, and I'd be interested.
And I know that what he's saying that, but it's just your voice.
It's profound.
It's your voice. And I had this experience. I went to a mastermind group event with my friend Ray Edwards, and he had this team of people called Heaven in Business. And it's a group of people who do regularly what this Bill Grimm guy did back in the days when he says, I got a word from God for you, right? And what this group of people, they sit there and they pray for just a moment, and then all of a sudden they begin to speak and tell you the vision that they see, and they begin to interpret or channel what they hear God saying.
Yes.
And there's this woman, her name is Siri, not from the iPhone, but her name is Siri, and she and a couple other people gave me these words from God, if you will, and I have the recordings of all of them. But the one that spoke to me the most, she says, I see you in a radio. By the way, these people had no idea who I was. They'd never heard the name Cliff Ravenscraft. They know nothing about me. She goes, are you in radio? Because I see you in like a radio booth speaking into a microphone. That's the first thing she said. And she goes, and as you speak, your voice causes chains to fall off of people's hearts. But it's not the words that you speak. It's like the frequency. It's the energy. She goes, I feel like when you enter a room, there's an excitement that comes with you. And it's like God, he's excited, for you. There's this excitement. And when I thought about the excitement, and I've been reading about the map of consciousness and different levels of consciousness and vibration, I do recognize that when I go into a room, there's no way the people in that room can stay at the same lower level of consciousness of guilt and shame. It's impossible. My presence and my voice itself, people say, Cliff, every time I get off of a coaching conversation with you, one woman, she says, I'm absolutely buzzing with excitement. Literally buzzing with excitement. And so, yes, Harrison, that is definitely something that I've experienced.
Yeah, I can feel you so excited to express this, my friend, because if anyone takes anything from this conversation today, I hope you take a lot of things, but if you take one thing, it's what Cliff is describing here. And there's a couple of components here that I want to break down. Firstly, I've also received those same comments, my friend, about my voice just being a space and place in which people can heal and feel themselves. And I want to take this a little bit deep here and explain, because you highlighted it beautifully, but you speak about being a channel, right? Speaking about being a divine channel. And this is another one of those illusions that most of us, myself included, had for a very long time, that only certain people channel. Only certain people can access the ability to channel. And it could not be more incorrect, in my opinion, because we are all divine channels. The question is, one, what are we channeling? And two, how are we channeling? And this how connects to these gifts. For some of us, how we channel you've spoken about a couple of times, Christ consciousness, our divine presence, our higher self, whatever you want to connect into within that inner world, we can tune into our gifts, and that gift could be our voice. But what I want to acknowledge here is one of the first conversations that we had, Cliff, was you were talking to me about light language. And I'm actually interested to see how far you've looked into that since that conversation. But, light language is an example of how the voice can be expressed through the channeling of the gifts. But it doesn't have to be with light language. It could be just speaking. I would even assert it could be just showing up, and the spaces between the words could be just as healing as the words themselves. What does that bring up in you, my friend?
Well, first of all, I've studied a lot about language since you and I spoke, and have even done had some incredible experiences with singing shamanic chants and all sorts of amazing things. But what I've come to experience for myself is that light language is any expression of our soul. And so for me, if I'm journaling, I will often start journaling with my own conscious mind. And over a period of transition, it turns into light language. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there writing things, not knowing exactly, where this is coming from. And one of the reasons why I'm able to create content so much, I've got 48 shows, over 4,700 podcast episodes, and I can hit record, Harrison. You give me any topic, and I can start speaking on that topic, and my heart just flows with stuff. And I'm not just making stuff up. I'm not just talking to hear myself talk. There's just an expression. And I get into that flow state, and I know that I'm channeling. And I, even though I'm speaking in English in words that is intelligible to people, I've been speaking light language for quite some time. And then, of course, there are other forms of light language as well, but those are the ones that I experience the most.
And this goes full circle. I'm so excited that it's developed in that way, my friend. It goes full circle to, again, the theme of this whole chat is, you spoke about how you can write the things down with your mind, start with that, but then it starts turning into something more. And the mind has almost resistance to it, or has confusion to it, but there's something more coming through. And the place that something more is coming from, we don't channel from, I think the word higher is a misconception. It's less about higher and more about deeper into oneself, through what? Not through the mind, through the heart, right? And this is really the role, this whole conversation that we've had today, whether it be through light language or speaking or, connecting to your frequency, it all starts with that heart connection. Have you noticed that, my friend?
I have noticed that. One of the things, Fabian Louis from Clubhouse, from the Ancient Ones room. Anyway, I had worked with her for 6 months as a coach, with her as my coach, and had an incredible experience. And one of the things that she had taught me was to create something called sacred space.
Mm.
And what I love about this is, what I envision is I'm like, listen, I want to set an intention for what's about ready to happen here, whether it's for my own personal time, or if I'm working with a one-on-one client, or I'm working with a group of people. And I actually did it before this conversation because I knew that I was not only speaking with you, but this is going to reach a lot of people. And so I'm like, I want to first and foremost call forth the highest good of all that is. So I want from the heavenly realms, I want all the way down here, a channel of light and love to be the center guide of everything that I'm doing through my heart. I also want to ask my ego to politely step aside and sit outside of the circle of this sacred space. Not because he's punished and that he's not unworthy. I want him to learn from this experience. And then I invited in my guides, my God, the higher self, my ascended masters, anybody that wants to aid me in this for my good and the highest good of everyone listening. And then once I've done that, I sit in silence. I make sure that my consciousness is in my heart space. And then I'm like, okay, I sense this presence. I sense this alignment. I am now declaring this is a sacred space until I say otherwise.
Beautiful.
And that's how I entered into our conversation today.
That's a powerful practical tip there, my friend. We've gone off into the weeds beautifully, by the way, into a lot of esoteric and spiritual stuff. But what you just highlighted is a very grounded, practical way that we can do that, right? And I love how you added in calling in the spiritual support team, because we've spoken a lot about illusions today. And another illusion right there is that we are alone, right? That we, as the human that we are, even if I'm not physically connected to someone, I can feel alone. But within the spiritual dynamic, what you just highlighted, we're never alone. And all that's usually missing is asking, is putting out the requests, sending the frequency through our antenna, as I would say.
And for those who are Christian still in that realm, what I would say is this: there was this time when Jesus was up on a mountain praying, and all of a sudden he called forth Elijah and Moses, and they manifested right there in his presence, and the disciples witnessed this. So this isn't something that's limited only to woo-woo New Age people or Hindus or anybody else.
That's really the intention of this chat today. I hope it's come across into people's hearts. Is everything we've talked about. This is not a Harrison thing. This is not a Cliff thing. This is accessible to each and every one of us. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to be good enough. You are enough in this moment. Cliff, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's gone into some beautiful spaces and places that I didn't even expect, and I love it. I have one more question for you, and if you've listened to my show, I think you know what it already is. But before I get to that, I do want to give you the space now. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to connect to you, if they want to listen to you, if they want to have you as a mentor, as a coach, where would you like to send them to find out more?
Well, you're listening to a podcast, and it'd be crazy for me not to tell you to type in Cliff Ravenscraft into the podcast app you're already in, and you'll see a bunch of podcasts with my name on it. But the Cliff Ravenscraft Show would be the one to probably start out with, and it'll link you out to others. But also, there is one place that I love to get people their first real introduction to me, and it's over at mindsetanswerman.com/free. And if you go to mindsetanswerman.com/free, you'll have my opening keynote address, and it says, give me 60 minutes and I promise you your life will never be the same. Mm-hmm. And this is an absolute promise. I know it to be true. It'll radically help you understand where your limiting beliefs are coming from, how to disassociate with them, replace them with empowering beliefs, and start you living down a life that you only dreamed of in the past. So mindsetanswerman.com/free. It's called All Beliefs Have Consequences.
I haven't watched that yet. So I think I'm going to do that after this conversation. And on that note, Cliff, I just want to give you a bit more love here before we finish. You've really supported me in my journey, not just with this conversation today, not just with knowing you and connecting to you, but I say this for the people listening. The content that Cliff expresses is not just from his heart, but it's practical. It's actionable. You don't have to wait or pay for anything. I would encourage you, if you feel pulled to Cliff, to invest in him. But the way that he shares from his heart, there is no expectation. And I've really felt that from you, my friend. So I just want to say thank you for expressing that way of being in the world.
Thank you very much. It's an incredible life to live, to know that there's an abundance source of everything.
Another illusion we could break there with that understanding, right? That we're all abundant. So, Cliff, my final question for you today to wrap up this conversation. This is the Cosmic Love Antenna, and in my journey, I grew up in a religious setting, and much like your experience, I felt a bit disillusioned with how the teachings were expressed to me about what God was. I became atheist. And then actually what brought me back to God and a connection to a higher power was interchanging God with the feeling and the embodiment of love. So I'm wondering, Cliff, how do you define that love word in your world?
How do I define the love word?
Love.
Yeah. Love. It's hard to define it, and here's why. Because I think that truly, in essence, nothing exists in reality other than love. So how can I use a word to describe all that is? It's coming from my biblical, upbringing. God is love, and I do believe God is love. And if I think of God is love, well, what is God? Well, God is all that is. There is nothing that is not God, and so therefore, if God is love, there is nothing that is not love, and so all is love. Harrison, that's my answer, brother.
Beautifully said, my friend. I don't think you could add anything more to that. And it doesn't need it, but it deeply resonates with my heart. And I could not agree more with you. My friend, I love you very much. Thank you for your time.
I love
today.
you too, brother.
Thank you for spending, I know it's holiday season. Thank you for spending holiday season with me. For all the people out there in the listening world, I hope this brought you value. I hope this connected you back into your beautiful heart space. If it did, please share this far and wide with someone that you think it can help and support. But regardless, we love you unconditionally. And until next time here on the show, we love you. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.